I caught salmon with my bare hands in the highlands. You have to hike back on yourself for 30 kilometers to get to the nearest bus stop. It's that looking for an adventure that's what inspires me. Once you get through that moment, things will get better. And any excuse to go out into the highlands and explore the wildlife and the scenery is well worth it.
If you've ever wanted to understand why we should be asking for nature's help on mindsets, adventures, and more, then you're in the right place. So welcome to Maximise Nature. Welcome to Maximise Nature. Today's guest is Ben. Ben Orton has completed the 257-mile hike up the Scottish Highlands. What we are going to explore with Ben is what his thought process was leading up to, during, and after the challenge, as well as how he thinks nature can provide the helping hand to people like you and me. Then we can take his good thoughts and advice and put them in a travel bag, ready to use on our next adventure. Ben, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi Max, I'm Ben. Currently live in Cardiff. I was born up in Scotland in Dundee. And I love the outdoors.
How did you get into trail hiking, and why was this the challenge you chose to complete?
I guess I just started by going for a walk one day.
Lovely.
Started off just day hikes and then wanted something longer, something more challenging. I chose this one because it's a really long hike. It's one of the longest route hikes you can do in the UK. It's also one of the most challenging. It's also in Scotland. Scotland's an incredible place if everyone's been there. I was lucky to spend 5 years there studying at Edinburgh University. And any excuse to go out into the highlands and explore the wildlife and the scenery is well worth it.
What was your thought process when setting yourself the challenge, and does it live up to the trail's namesake?
Yes, it's a very challenging hike. The weather is very unpredictable. The terrain is wet, boggy, rocky. Lots of the route involves making your own path. There's no set path, so you have to firstly try and navigate using a map and compass, and secondly, you have to get into the real thick of it and swaying through like grass and gorse and peat up to like your knees, sometimes even like your hips, and cross some rivers and almost climbing over Munros themselves. You can get up to about 900 meters in elevation above sea level. So yeah, some really challenging terrain. It is known as one of the most challenging hiking routes in the UK, and yeah, for sure, it definitely, in my experience, it definitely is.
What would you say would you say you faced any challenges before you set off, maybe planning wise, or was it all pretty plain sailing?
Yeah, I probably did less planning than I should have done. I'm a bit more of a spontaneous person, so I tend to leave things a little bit last minute, but that does add to the excitement of it. I did have to make sure I had certain pieces of kit because being in those remote parts of the UK, things can go wrong, so you need to have the stuff just in case things happen. So I had a GPS tracker to call for help if I needed anything, and had all my waterproofs, had to plan all the food. So I was carrying all my food for the 2 weeks. Yeah, having things like a good tent, a good hiking bag. These are all things that I had before on previous hikes, so all I had to do was kind of put it all together. But yeah, I know some people spend quite a long time planning, and I think the more planning you do, the better, really. The more prepared you are, the more you've studied the route, the more you've roughly planned where you like to go. I don't like to plan too much in terms of the route, maybe like 2-3 days at a time. Kind of gives you that flexibility. When you're actually out there, you can decide, I want to go left today, or I want to go right tomorrow. And things change when you're hiking, so like the weather will change, and then you have to change your route slightly. You have to maybe go and try and get to a village so you can get some more food, or or if you fancy a night in a hotel, things like that. Afterwards, I guess cleaning all my stuff, having a wash is pretty important afterwards. It's also quite challenging getting back home from the very top of Scotland because you finish at a place called Cape Wrath and you then have to hike back on yourself for 30 kilometres to get to the nearest bus stop. So I did it in March time, so if you do it in the summer, there's a ferry that you can get to a place called Durness to catch the bus, but in March the ferry is closed, so you have to hike back 30 kilometres to catch the bus, which only arrives once every 3 or 4 days, I think. So you really have to time it right to catch the bus to then get to the nearest train station, which is Inverness. So, and then from there you can work your way down the country. So that was probably a big challenge at the end of however far it was, 270 miles or something. Yeah.
Oh, you said about the trek back in order to actually get home, and you said also about spontaneity as well. So, with that in mind, would there be anything you do differently, or would you keep it spontaneous? Because I often find that some of the best adventures are the spontaneous ones.
Yeah, I agree. I think it maybe not a spontaneous adventure as a whole, but the spontaneous moments, like the things that happened that you didn't plan for, and yeah, ended up being really exciting and different. Those are the moments that stand out on the hike. In terms of changing things, there's probably not too much I would change. I think it was a amazing experience. This route has lots of variations, so there's no one set way to go from Fort William up to the very top of Cape Wrath. So you can add bits on, you can climb Munros along the way. Munros are mountains above 3,000 feet in Scotland. So I think if I was to do it again, I'd maybe do some slightly different variations. I'd probably do it when it's a bit warmer. I quite like going for a dip in rivers and lochs and stuff, but it was very cold. It was like, it must have been like 1 or 2 degrees in the rivers and things, and I only went in 1 or 2 times. But maybe I'd do it at a warmer time of year, maybe like this time of year in May would be quite a good time. It's a very popular time in May, and it's getting increasingly popular. And there used to be like tens of people that would do it every month. Now you get hundreds of people doing it every month. But I think it's also important that people realise it's a very difficult route. It's not like many others in the UK. You do have to have some experience hiking and be able to navigate and look after yourself, essentially. So, yeah, it's not for everyone, I guess.
Now that you've completed the challenge, can you think of ways nature gave you the helping hand, both mentally and physically?
The first thing that comes to mind is the weather. When it's beautiful, or when you get that change in conditions, when it's horrible, freezing cold, snow and raining and things, and then suddenly it changes and you get the sunshine coming out. That really gives you a boost. You do have those ups and downs on long adventures like this, and I think appreciating when nature does that, when it suddenly gives you that spark, I think you try and like hold on to that, because you never know when the rain will come again, or when you'll next be waking up freezing cold. In terms of physically, the terrain would would change around a bit. Sometimes it'd be very difficult, very painful on your feet. But when you got that nice smooth kind of trails to walk on, that was definitely very handy. I know other people do use nature for food as well on the route. Some people love foraging and sometimes even fishing. I didn't do much of that. I'm trying to get into foraging because it'd be cool to know exactly what is out there. But I know some people really use nature in that way.
Oh, you said about the foraging. I mean, to be honest, that's something I'd never really thought about. But yeah, that does sound quite interesting, sort of like Bear Grylls type of style. And the mental side of it with the weather as well, I think is also really important. Like you said, I also run. So whenever I'm racing, I always love a sunny day. It's so much easier to run it, so much easier to keep your mind on the challenge itself, which is the run. On that note, and on things that sound and are really fun to both me and our listeners, how do you reckon that people hearing your story may feel inspired to get into hiking? And what would you say are the basic sort of equipment that people need to get started?
I guess it's that looking for an adventure, that's what inspires me. Is if there's something nearby, maybe it's a waterfall or a hill to climb up, it's that something nearby that inspires you to go to the top or to go exploring in the woods. Um, One thing I do is I look on Google Maps and I look for all the green patches, and I go, okay, I'm going to explore that green patch. I've never been there before. I'll get a train, or I'll get a bus, or I'll just walk from home, go for a run maybe, and just go and explore. So I guess what you need for that is you need like the idea, you need to think about going for the adventure, and then maybe a pair of shoes would be handy. Some food's always pretty nice to have on a trip like that. Yeah, do look at the weather because it depends where you're going around the world, but weather can change and it can get quite cold on top of hills and mountains. So make sure you're keeping dry, keeping warm, and keeping trying not to get wet as well. As for other equipment, if you're staying overnight, make sure you invest in some decent camping gear in terms of like a tent and a sleeping bag. Things can get quite cold at night, so it's well worth spending a little bit more money to make sure you're comfortable. And yeah, I think the big thing is just having fun and appreciating as much as you can when you're on the way on your trip. It's not so easy at times when things are difficult, when the terrain's horrible, it's pouring down with rain, it's hard to see the positive side, but everything changes eventually, it will pass, and once you get through that moment, things will get better, and you'll realise why you're actually out there. So yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, definitely. In terms of, you said about the obvious, so tent equipment, warm clothes, and stuff to keep you dry. Did you read any books or look at any social media posts or pages that you used to help organise your journey before you even stepped out of the door and went on that incredible trek that you've been on?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's so much out there in terms of gear. There's so many different companies. People have so many different opinions of what's better than what's the best thing to have, what's the latest thing. Technology is always changing as well, so as new things come out, what the best thing to have may change. I found Facebook groups really useful, so I follow a group which focuses on the Cape Wrath Trail, which is the name of the route. So in that group you have people that have done the route before, maybe they managed parts of the route, maybe they're going to be doing it soon, and in that page people post what equipment they have, what challenges they had on the route, things to look out for, and it's a very friendly place just to ask questions and find out more about the trail before, like you say, before you step outside the door. There's probably pages for all kinds of routes around the world, and even things like, I think there's a website called Walk Highlands, which talks about all kinds of hiking routes across Scotland and I think maybe the UK as well. And it has all kinds of information about how difficult the route is, what the terrain is like, and it has some reports about previous people's experiences doing those routes. So I think, yeah, doing a bit of digging and seeing what you can find online using sources like that, yeah, can be really helpful.
Nice. You mentioned about digging. I often find myself, especially when I'm hiking or like backpacking, for example, trying to dig out the sweets and stuff. Is there anything that you love to eat while you're on the go on like a hike or something? Or is it just pure water? Even though you can't eat that.
Yeah, it is important to keep the water going, keep hydrated. You can often forget that. My favourite things to eat, I love these cereal bars. I think it's a company called Jordan's. They like they've got cranberries and berries and things inside with some oats. I think I love those. You're also trying to pack quite light when you do these adventures, so often stuff is dry and lightweight, not too much water content in them. So that does kind of limit what you choose to bring. But I do think, yeah, having something like your favourite food just to give you a boost. I think I had a rice pudding ration pack that I was saving for a rough day. So it had like a rice pudding and cinnamon, and I'd also take some sugar sachets from cafes and put that on top of my porridge in the morning. And little treats like that, yeah, really like boosted your morale and stuff each morning. Yeah, so I recommend for people to have those little things that, even if it's a tiny little piece of food, something that will change your mood when things aren't so easy, especially on a long trek like this one.
Yeah, no, definitely. I find that things like, I try to be healthy, but I do love a Kit Kat sometimes. They're so nice, and they give you, I guess, all the sugar you really need. Saying about the sweet things that kept you going, especially in the hard moments on your hike, we're gonna play a little game. It's called Sweet Tooths. It's basically what you're gonna do is your task is to tell me three things, one truth and two falsehoods about your adventure up in the Highlands, and then I'm gonna try and pick out the sweet truth correctly. Either I get the sweet victory of picking the truth, or you get the sweet victory of persuading me to pick incorrectly. What are your three things?
I caught salmon with my bare hands in the Highlands one day. I My tent got uh, blown away in the wind one night at 4 in the morning, and I had to put it back together. And I saw the Northern Lights when I was out hiking uh, on day 10.
Ooh, caught someone with your bare hands, did you? Right, so I have a question. How big was said salmon?
It's about the size of a shoe, size 11 shoe.
What colour was said salmon?
Salmon are kind of grey brown with some red patterning on them. They've got quite a long feature in their face as well. They're quite distinctive.
Was catching salmon just something you knew you were good at instantly, or has it been something you've sort of learned over your years?
Oh, I wouldn't say I'm good at it. Just spontaneous thing that happens. Just went for it and ended up picking one up. I put him back as well. Sorry about the dog.
No, don't worry about the dog. It adds to the mysteriousness of this game, I guess. I also love the fact you put it back. That's really doing a bit for nature. With the tent blowing away, how did it blow away when you were in the tent, or were you outside?
Yeah, so I was inside the tent the whole time, but all the pegs came out and I went. It took me down the hill a little bit, so I was always inside the tent. But the high wind, I'm not sure how high the winds were. I think it was about 40 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour. And yeah, tent collapsed and we had a little fun picking it up, putting it back together again.
Was this a big tent, or was it just a single man tent? I know that might sound like a stupid question, but I need to know for this game.
Okay, it's a 3-person tent. Although 3 people sleeping in there would be very cozy. It's more like a large 2-person tent.
Believable much. I can't lie, I've been caught up with the whole salmon in the tent thing. What was your last true or falsehood?
I saw the Northern Lights on day 10 of my hike.
Were these northern lights particularly bright, or did you have to look through your phone?
Yeah, you could see them with your naked eye. They're about half an hour one evening. It was quite a clear night. They were amazing.
There's something about the Northern Lights and the fact that as of recording this, we saw them over the UK in early May, or the first 2 weeks of May, and I don't think that one's true. However, I'm going to entertain it a little more. Did you know whether anyone else you were messaging, for example, this might sound like a stupid question, but anyone else that you were in contact with, say at home or something, saw them that night as well?
I don't know. I wasn't really in contact with people when I was on this hike. I had my phone switched off most of the time, so I wasn't really in contact with people. So, as far as I know, no one that I'm close to saw them that night.
Okay, then. It's time to get serious with this. Going back to the court summon, and just how completely random it is. But fair play if you did. Um, did you ever think that maybe you shouldn't try and catch a salmon? Maybe you should just try to eat one of the ready meals? And you said earlier as well about the porridge and everything. Part of me doesn't believe that you actually tried to catch the salmon.
Yeah, I succeeded in catching the salmon. I was never planning on eating the salmon. I was trying to be vegetarian on this route, but I just thought I'll seen it in the movies. How hard could it be?
That's completely fair, to be honest. Caught a salmon, got blown away by a tent, a 3-man tent, when you were in the tent, or you saw the Northern Lights. I'm gonna go. Oh, I'm gonna regret saying this, but I'm gonna go with you caught the salmon because I don't believe that you got blown away, even though. No, we'll stick with the salmon.
Oh, the salmon was false. Getting blown away was true, and seeing the Northern Lights, unfortunately, was false. Although I'd love to see them.
Well, that's a great way to start that game, then, isn't it? You beat me. Well done. Also, there's no way you should have caught a salmon. Anyway, how did you get blown away? You weren't the only person in your tent, right?
Yeah, just me and a few insects and spiders and stuff. Yeah, it was just really windy one night. I was camping up on top of a mountain about maybe 600, 700 meters high. There were some really strong winds that night, and most of the pegs came up my tent and for a little roll. I didn't get blown away very far, just a couple of meters down a hill, and just had to put everything back together again.
Fair. I mean, congratulations. You won. One last question about that whole tent thing. Would you maybe change anything about the tent? Would you put pegs in more secure places, or would you camp somewhere more secure? Or was there really no other option? Were you so tired from the trek that you thought, you know what, we'll sleep here tonight?
I guess my tent's not really designed for those high wind speeds. It's more a recreational tent. It's one of the ones recommended for DV trips, and so maybe a tent that would be better designed for those conditions. Maybe they tend to be a lot more expensive though. But yeah, maybe something like that. Yeah, but other than that, I think the tent I've got is pretty good, pretty cozy, pretty spacious for one person.
I mean, you said it right at the start. You said about spontaneity, and I don't think you could get more spontaneous than your tent blowing not only itself a couple meters, but the person inside it. So I think that's a pretty good life lesson. Just try and be careful, I guess, is the one thing I'd say. But no, that's actually mad. Now, Ben, for the listeners listening on whatever device they're listening to, whether it be on a walk or on their way to work or something like that, when you got to the first peak, what was the high point, and what do you remember about the moment? Just so the people listening can live vicariously through you, because you said it yourself on your Strava that it was so hard but so beautiful at the same time. That's kind of the really lovely part about nature as well.
Yeah, I wasn't really going to the peaks of hills or mountains, but there was some definite high points. I remember hiking through Glenfinnan and getting over the top from Glenfinnan into the next glen. It was super sunny day. There were some waterfalls. I think this was on day 2, and that was a really nice moment. Kind of there was nowhere else I really wanted to be at that moment. About 30 deer down in the valley, and the waterfall was trickling down and the stream was going down into the glen below. Loads of mountains and forest in the background. It was an amazing view, and you didn't really want to be anywhere else. I was just kind of blown away a bit by how beautiful it was. And it was a long hike up as well. It was a long, maybe like 200-meter climb with all your stuff, so you're pretty tired, but yeah, it's just amazing.
That does sound absolutely incredible, to be fair. I imagine that having completed the hike and got back, that when you look back on it, it was a really good experience. Maybe for some people once in a lifetime, but I'm sure you'll be back out there as well at some point. Some would want to experience the hike you just been on, or go to Australia, or go skydiving, for example. Where do you think your next adventure is, and do you promise to come back and tell us all about it?
Sure. I don't know exactly where I'll go next. I haven't got anything planned in terms of long distance hiking. I do a bit of trail running as well. I do that more frequently than the hiking, actually. I've got a 100-kilometre ultramarathon in July across the Brecon Beacons, so that's my next adventure, I guess. I'm looking forward to that. But I'd love to go to Norway someday, or go to Canada, somewhere where the remote areas are a bit more vast, a bit more expansive, different wildlife. And also Ireland as well. I'd love to do a trip to Ireland. Along the coastline of Ireland would be a great trip. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what we get up to.
Wow, an ultramarathon, mad. That takes a lot of training. I'm guessing. That all sounds incredible, especially Iceland, Norway, and that sort of area. That's definitely an area that I would definitely want to go, and I can see why you would want to go, with all of the different habitats, environments, etc., and really get amongst nature. With that in mind, do you think that there's anywhere in the UK, for example, that you'd recommend people going that isn't the Scottish Highlands, for example, and the Brecon Beacons as well?
Yeah, I think there are some really beautiful places all over the country. I was over in Shropshire recently, and I heard of the Shropshire Hills, but I didn't realise how beautiful they were. Kind of the West Midlands part of the UK. They were amazing. I spent a lot of time growing up in Somerset, and now a bit of time in Cornwall. And there are some areas down there that are amazing, down some estuaries and some forests, and Bodmin Moor as well. But there's still so much of the UK to explore. I think I've realised recently that I often go abroad for holidays, and there's still so much you can see in the UK. So I'm trying to spend the next couple of years of really exploring the country that you're born in, and country you're living in. So yeah, it just takes a little bit of thinking, and just go out and see what you can find.
That's so true. There's so much literally beyond the door, as it were. And I think it's really important that people really try and understand that is the case, whether it be a 5-minute walk down the road, 10-minute drive, or even a train ride, for example. But there are so many beautiful things in the UK. Like, we are really lucky about where we live, and no matter who's listening to this, I'm sure that there's an aspect of beauty to the natural environment around you as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you very much for joining us, Ben, on the Maximise Nature podcast. One last task, which I want you to do, is write down a nature phrase. Obviously, don't tell the listeners, because that will defeat the whole point of it. What is one nature phrase, you can message me it or something like that I need to get into my next podcast while I'm talking to my guest, without my guest knowing?
Sure thing. I'll have a little think. Get back to you.
Perfect. Well, I hope you've enjoyed your time on the podcast, Ben. It's been incredible talking about your 13-day hike, but thank you very much for coming on. And until next time, get out and explore what's beyond your front door.